Hi, it's Gabby. So something that I used to do on my Instagram all the time is kind of these I don't know, life lessons, if you will. And it's very sunny, so I'm sorry, I'm very squinty. Um, One of the things I wanted to talk about is kind of compromise in relationships. And there's just like a huge there's just so much information around this. And Josh and I are going to do a vow renewal, and it's really made me look back at our relationship and why we want to do this and where we've come from. And the first couple of years of our relationship, including my pregnancy and probably the first 6 months of David's life, was this beautiful honeymoon stage where we just fell madly in love with each other in this life. And then the next 4 years were some of the hardest and worst years ever in our relationship, from navigating postpartum to navigating being fresh parents, to navigating being an adult and living on our own for the first time for both of us. Really, and having something where you really need to pay attention and fight for it because it was our kid. And it was just a lot, and it was very obvious our mental illnesses were at play. And then we kind of came to a standing after terrible fights, screaming on top of each other, throwing things. At that point, only one physical altercation because we were hammered, and just so much insecurities and so much ugliness from both of us, honestly. And, our poor child had to endure it and go through it in some of the most important years of his life. And then at that point, because of him, and obviously because of our outrageousness, we really had to learn to figure each other out and figure it out. And so the next step for us was really kind of figuring out our mental disorders. And that's pretty much what we did. And then we ended up getting engaged after my dad had died, and got married pretty much within a year later because the pandemic hit. But after that, we were in this great honeymoon stage where we had finally been aware of our mental disorders. We had been able to name it, explain it to each other, and kind of put a why to everything of how we acted, what had happened in the past. And we're actively working at being better parents and becoming aware of David's things. Let alone, I was going through such grief that I really didn't have a choice but to look within. Then, thanks to outside sources, which was kind of the first time since this recollection, or recollection, I don't even know the right word. This is kind of the first time since we had really made a change in our relationship and in who we are, that something had happened, and it was just tons and tons of outside things affecting our relationship. And we almost failed completely because of it, because there was just so much intervening, no communication, not, anything, not people's emotions being validated. The relationship was no longer a priority, and these other things were happening, and it was physically too much for Josh, and I was completely felt unheard. There's wind, sorry. But then our marriage almost failed. We almost divorced, and then ultimately came to another deciding factor. But this was the deepest one we had ever come to. And then we got back together and got pregnant with our twins, and the rest is history. But when we got pregnant with those twins, as I've said before, I lost our house, from which we thought was going to be our forever house, from my mother-in-law, had intense issues with my mother-in-law. And then on top of it, my husband, found out his father wasn't his biological father, and found out his biological father wanted to be a part of his life, and met all these wonderful people from it. Now we're in relationships, but his biological father has passed on. And so many things had added up for him, and he found out so much about his life, and that was one of the hardest things to go through right after dealing with this house issue, where to the point that we had nowhere to go. We really didn't. It took us a year. And honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that she refused to go to the courts because she was doing so much illegal stuff, we were screwed. And honestly, we wanted her to, so that we would get emergency housing, but we didn't. And then luckily, we found this place and we were able to move. But we did that a few weeks before I gave birth to twins. And then we had the NICU stay. And then we had my terrible postpartum and adjusting to twins, let alone 3 kids. And, then his job firing him because he had to choose his family. And it's like, all of these things would have totally torn us down before. And being able to name and understand the why did not fix that. And when push came to shove, it wasn't, it's okay to understand that, and that's great, and being able to put your finger on it, but that doesn't change your actions, and that doesn't change, how you act in the future. That doesn't change your communication skills. That doesn't, it doesn't make things acceptable. It's just understanding, okay, this is where that comes from. Now, what do I need to do in order to kind of make a compromise with myself on what parts, where I'm at right now? What parts do I need to be softer to myself with? What parts do I need to explain to others that I only have so much control over, so I have to hold these boundaries because of that? What parts are things that I can't not do? I have to be able to wake up and watch my videos for 30 minutes, period, whatever it may be. And being able to name those, express feels to your partner, and then listening to theirs back and being able to come up with a compromise not only helps your daily routine, not only helps you understand how outings are going to be, how prepping for outings are going to be, how you're going to handle bills, how you're going to talk about things, how you're going to handle things with the kids, cleaning the house, things like that. Understanding each other, accepting each other where you're at right now in that moment. Not this idolized version of them, not this person, This is the thing that I heard on a podcast was, how was your partner's house and who were they before you actually got in a relationship? Why are you expecting different from them? There are things that you can compromise, but you really have to understand where each other are at in their mental health and physically in order to be able to make this relationship works. And I've come to realize that figuring this out with Josh has made me figure it out with David and understand him with his ADHD and as a 9-year-old and as my twins, understanding they're just annoying babies when things are strugglesome, understanding this with my family's faults, understanding this with friends, accepting people where they're at right now, no matter how good that looks. It doesn't look good majority of the time. Just accepting, this is what they have to offer. Finding your hard, firm boundaries of, I can only accept this. And you taking action to keep those boundaries, not them, you. And then you kind of meeting a compromise with both of those things is how you keep relationships going, even through the hard. And we've kind of lost that thought because we're in this stuck thing where it's well, that's who I am because I have ADHD. Okay, well, you're hurting me. You're hurting me in the process because of it. And what part of that do I need just to accept? And what part are you willing to acknowledge for me? And just take that 2 seconds and validate the feelings. Because a lot of times that's all that needs to be said. Be I understand that's what you're going through, but you're hurting me. And I just want you to validate me in that. While you, come to terms with understanding you can't snap immediately. Now, that doesn't mean you accept abuse, but life isn't as simple as X, Y, and Z. Life isn't black and white. There's so much gray, and I think we've come too far on the scale of accepting too much to now accepting nothing at all, and thinking it's this this or bust kind of way, and that's just not how it is. It really isn't. And Josh and I have been through the lowest of lows, and we've really learned to mature within our relationship and able to stick it out even with some of the hardest times of our entire life. But we didn't come from great backgrounds. We didn't come from people that taught us how to deal with ourselves. We both were kind of thrown in a room and left to be psychotic. So of course those behaviors come out in all of my relationships. And yeah, so it's being able to say why you're doing something really is the first step. But the next step is really learning your boundaries in that moment. What are the goals that you have to be able to change certain behaviors because you want to be better at something? What are things that just are never going to change? It's something that you need for yourself in a healthy way for you. And what are things that you're willing to push yourself to be comfortable with for the sake of whatever relationship you're in? What are things you have to learn? What are classes you need to take? What are books you need to read? You don't always have to go to professional. I always recommend professional help, but you don't always have to do that. So that's how I feel about really. I had to finish this inside because my phone died and I did not know. But basically, what I'm just saying is like there are things that can be done, some inner work that needs to be withheld. And there are so many ways that you can figure out how to do this, but you can't just remain the same. Like you have to come and meet a compromise of where, things are at, where people are at, especially. If where people are at are never, it's never a good thing. It's never good what it looks. And you need to figure out what are strong boundaries that you're not able to cross based on where you're at. And, you need to protect those. You need to act in those to make sure that you're okay and kind of see people where they're at. If you can't hang out with them or you need a way to escape, then escape. Don't try to sit through stuff that is repetitive, and dealing with these people. And if it's not something that you can tolerate, then you have to make the choice to leave. But I think we're just so quick to leave and not work harder through things because we've swayed it too far, over. And so we went from having zero rights to now being like, we can't tolerate, we tolerate too much to not tolerating anything at all. And that's just, completely unrealistic. And that's why no relationships are lasting, even friendships. And there are things that are completely intolerable, and that looks different for every single human being, and that's what you need to figure out. But there are also things that if you just take a look in the mirror and maybe compromise, maybe think about how that person was when you first met them, not this idea that you have in your head. Are you setting up expectations that are completely unrealistic? And that also comes with kids. Like we set up these expectations, these assumptions about people, and like you're making that up in your head because you're seeing the best version of them. Hold on, so sorry. Which is great, but that's not who they actually are right now. You need to focus on who they are right now, in this moment. Let me get away. The sun's so glaring in my eyes. Oh my god. Okay. But Josh and I have been through a lot of shit, and the thing recently that we've really realized is knowing your why just kind of touches the first base on things and makes you understand why you're doing these things, kind of helps you come to realization that there's only so much in your control, and a lot of it has to do with past lives and past things that you've dealt with and not dealt with, but now you have to deal with those things. And even not dealing with those things, just becoming aware is kind of step number one. And this awareness can help you create these boundaries that are necessary for yourself and necessary for you to have for certain people so that it doesn't spark up these things you don't want to be. And you've noticed that they happen because of X, Y, and Z, but some things you just have to learn to accept. And they're like, are you making this because this thing bothers you? Oh my God. Are you making this boundary because it bothers you? For example, cleaning up the house. Your partner probably was a scumbag when you guys got together. And I just say that as like a funny thing, like not for real. And they just don't prioritize cleaning. They never did. Maybe they grew up and their parents did it for them. Maybe they grew up and that's how it was like that in their home. Just because they live with you doesn't mean they have to instantly change things. Why don't you start small if that's who they are and give them one task? Maybe they don't think about these things and you do. Maybe you take on that task and they do something else. And when it comes to like waking up, maybe your partner needs 30 minutes of nobody talking to them, unless it's an emergency. Even as a person that has 3 kids and twins, besides emergencies, I can make that happen. Sometimes that's all people need, but it's also you being able to express that too. You have to be able to express your needs. And that's a really hard part for me and, a really hard part for Josh. And the more we're able to say that, and even saying it instantly in the moment with no judgment from either party and validating and saying, this, and are you willing to do this for me? Because this really affects me. And right now I'm working through it and I'm going to make a goal to not be like this anymore. But it does affect me right now. So until then, I need you to do this. Maybe things are just things you need to work on. There's other things that are permanent. And either way, we need to learn to accept this about people. And if you really think that things are so black and white that there's so much things that you're able to control, and you think you're going to be able to have a lasting even friendship being like that, and being thinking that people have to walk on eggshells on you, you're crazy. Believe me, as a person that people have to walk eggshells around, my arm is dying. Ooh. Oh no. Okay. No, this way. Oh my god, I'm literally dying. Well, anywho, now that I've completely ruined my camera, that's basically my point, is that you do have to come to compromise about things, and even your disorders. There are goals that you need to set for yourself to be better at, and there's also things that you're not going to be able to control, but that should be as small of a list as you can make it. And if it's still a pretty big list, try to pick a goal at a time to be able to make better, because that's going to make you a better person for yourself and a better person for other relationships. And we are a creature that needs other people. You know what I mean? We need affection, we need society, we need groups. And no, we don't need to give ourselves entirely to individuals, but we also need to come to compromises and work towards being better for the sake of our loved ones, because that part is definitely missing in a lot of people's lives. And that is my biggest part of advice for long-term friendships and a relationship. Love you, bye.